Struggling with the anger and betrayal while trying to co-parent with a cheating ex. My ex-wife had an affair in November 2018, which I found out about in August 2020. She had no desire in working on the affair as I performed the Choose Me dance, but then she realized what it was and stopped. She moved out in November 2020 and is now officially dating her long-distance affair partner. The problem I'm experiencing is that I'm battling with my anger as a result of all of this, and I'm losing my kids 50% of the time. My youngest, 8, is experiencing feelings of abandonment as a result of missing his mother, and my oldest, 8, is experiencing increasing worry. I retained the marital home and attempted to keep things as normal as possible, holding my anger, sadness, within and just chatting with my therapist and friends. My youngest brought an item from my ex's home last week, which is a trigger for her affair. I contacted her to ask her not to have my kids bring them over since they are a major trigger, and she replied, "Okay. Sorry, but that is no longer expected." She dropped the kids off at my place 20 minutes late this morning and didn't explain why. I confronted her about it, but she did not answer. I then repeated it, saying, "Who are you to have an affair that has left me with enormous triggers, nightmares, and so on, and not even have the decency to notify me she's running 15 minutes late with the kids?" "I am okay," she simply said, "so you deal with your issues." I realize this is usual procedure when dealing with a narcissist, but my kids watched me slam the front door on her when she said that. I strive to be the greatest example I can, yet I sometimes falter. Throughout all of this, including counseling, I have always taken the high road and never said anything negative about my ex to my children. I haven't even told my friends and relatives about her infidelity for their support, and her parents and sister. It drives me nuts that my ex-wife is still seeing her affair partner and is oblivious to the harm she has done to me and my family. Every day, I resist the impulse to phone her affair partner's parents and expose him for the jerk that he is. He's 39 and unmarried, so he doesn't have a wife to tell. What good will it do? My friends, and therapist, ask, but I keep thinking that I am exposing a cheater who has no regard for me or my family. In another case, it's just a matter of time until this affair partner is presented to my children. Any advice other than work on yourself, work out, hobbies, etc. that we all receive as the BS's is welcomed. Story 2. I cheated on my wife. I've been dating my now wife for 5.5 years. Relationship with a long distance. She lived in Western Canada, I lived in the Caribbean. We met over the course of 2 weeks while she was on vacation. We both come from extremely different cultural backgrounds, our families' histories are very different, and every now and then we'd run into a minor language barrier. English isn't either of our first languages. Before she went, they decided to become a couple. Because this was both of our first relationships, we had no concept how the marital life worked. We'd go back and forth to each other's families' homes, living together for months before either of us had to return home. We would continually dispute about little matters. Our life was not a happy one. I always wanted to, she was rarely in the mood after a week of being together. Despite the continual fighting, we always made amends and moved on. Despite my desire, we never cheated on one another. When I acquired a job in Utah in late 2018, we agreed to wait until we had saved enough money to move in together. Immigration restrictions permitted her to stay in the United States for 3 months without a visa, so we had to marry if we wanted to live together forever. When COVID arrived in the United States in 2020, immigration offices were shuttered until further notice. I became an alcoholic between 2018 and 2021. She eventually received her visa this year, and we married and began the process of obtaining her a green card. Our life seemed to have improved. I stopped being demanding and desperate, but was now at an all-time low owing to my constant drinking, which she despised. I went to rehab after 4 months of living together and quit drinking cold turkey. For approximately a month, things improved considerably. Then, despite my attempts, everything came to a halt. Communication, sympathy, tenderness, and closeness. We were like 2 roommates who seldom spoke. This continued for a month. Arguments continued to erupt. Perhaps my development is too little, too late, I reasoned. I met this other lady at work throughout that dreadful month. He's 10 years younger than me and not as attractive as my wife. But I felt a connection with her that I hadn't had in a long time with my wife. We both fell in love with the other lady. I never told her I was married and never wore my wedding band. We went to a hotel after a sushi dinner one night. I lied to her that my apartment's heater had broken earlier that day and that I would stay at a hotel while it was repaired. And I lied to my wife that I would be going out to a party at a coworker's home and would probably remain the night. I informed the other lady the truth before anything further could happen. But we both desired one other too much at that moment. I cheated on my girlfriend for the first time in over 6 years. And I wasn't into casual. This other lady and I had become quite fond of one another. We chatted a lot the following day. She was being let go from our workplace and was planning to travel home to her family, to a far state. Her contract is set to end in the first week of January, and she was not offered the choice to resign. I already knew this since I met her. She also advised me not to end my marriage only to be with her. She felt terrible about everything and sobbed because she had to go despite her want to remain with me. I consoled her by telling her it wasn't her fault, that I was unhappy in my marriage, and that I wanted to be with her. However, he conceded, "What sort of expectation would you have from a guy who divorces to pursue someone else he just met?" She shared my opinion and even suggested that my wife and I attend marital therapy. We still saw each other at work, spoke, flirted, and texted each other throughout the evenings over the following several days. When I returned home and saw my wife, I felt like the biggest jerk ever. So I only told her half of what occurred, leaving out what I believed were minor information. She sobbed and immediately began searching for a new place. After her applications were refused, I informed her she could remain for as long as she wanted or needed. She then admitted that she nearly cheated on me last year. I inquired as to why she had never mentioned anything before. She said I would have dumped her, which I would not have done. All of our problems from the previous month vanished out of nowhere. For a few days, everything was wonderful. But I couldn't stop thinking about the other lady. I informed my wife about the second half of the information I had left out of my initial confession. She took it much harder than the previous time. We decided to go to couples counseling. Meanwhile, the other lady, whom I'm still obsessed about, began to ghost me. I hadn't even seen her at work in a week. I assumed she was striving to remove herself from me in order to get over her emotions so that she could go for home more easily. I didn't go after her in the hopes of reconciling with my wife. But as the days passed, I began to miss the other lady more and more. I spent much of my time with my wife wishing I was with the other lady. I finally saw her at work. I saw her glancing at me a few times before we spoke. But when we did, she was aloof, hardly spoke to me despite my efforts, and never left her friend's side, who was a real pain in the in general. Another employee, who was unaware of what transpired between us, informed me that he was at a party with her over the weekend. The way he presented the tale made me think they after the party. But I couldn't be sure, didn't dare to inquire, and didn't care if it occurred. Whatever the case, it stung. This week, my wife and I attended 2 marital therapy sessions. I told the therapist everything that had happened over the years. He said that he still believed we had enough possibility to salvage our relationship. We were about to file for divorce before the sessions. Following the sessions, we decided it would be worth a shot to attempt to salvage everything. When I informed her about the first part of my treachery, I was afraid she'd bring up divorce. At this moment, I assumed the other lady was through with me. But I'm still interested in her. You're making her life unnecessarily difficult by following after her, I told myself. I opted to accept that she was no longer in my life, but I still needed to tell her how I felt about her. Not to sway her choice, but because I wanted to get something off my chest. So I sent her a text that was nearly as lengthy as this one, telling her how I felt about her, how much I wanted and missed her, and how I understood why she wouldn't want us to be anything. It seems like she blacklisted my phone number or something since the SMS never received the delivered banner underneath it. Or maybe it was because of its enormity. I'm not sure, I'm not very tech savvy. I met her in the workplace again 2 days later. She appeared more at ease with me this time. When we briefly spoke, I even cracked a joke. She looked a lot different from the last time I saw her. I'm completely perplexed and ecstatic. I don't believe she ever viewed the lengthy text. I didn't ask since we had already agreed not to discuss any of this in the workplace. As a result, here I am. At this point, I believe the best thing for me to do is to forget about the other lady, divorce my wife, suffer alone for a bit while I get my SHT together, and move on. I've already done enough harm to both of them. I'm confused about remaining with my wife while thinking about the other lady all the time. I've informed my rehab counselor, a handful of pals, and the marriage counselor about this. The first 2 just remarked, "I don't know what to tell you. Just because you want to recover doesn't mean you can't heal with your wife still in the picture," the final one offered. My wife still loves me in certain ways. It would hurt her if I announced my intention to divorce despite all of her previous and current efforts and patience. Meanwhile, I'm not enthusiastic about her since I'm still pining for the other lady. Who, once again, is leaving the state in a few weeks and seems to be over me, maybe? Maybe she's still having trouble with it? I've never been so emotionally befuddled in my life. I haven't felt this dumb since I started drinking. I submitted this because sharing people about my stress helps me deal. I'm not seeking for pity or anything. I'm quite aware that I'm the evil person in this situation.